Hello, creative people. Welcome to Creative Conversations. My name is Hollis Citron, and we are so happy that you have chosen to spend your time with us. I am owner and founder of I Am Creative and Express Yourself Publishing, and I am on a mission to expand the definition of creativity beyond a pencil and a paintbrush and to empower people, especially adults, to own their voices and talents that come in so many different forms. This space was created to talk to people with all different kinds of jobs, hobbies, and interests, and to have conversations about experiences and perspectives, all centered around three questions. How do you define creativity? How do you incorporate it into your life? And why do you think it's important? Then we have a free-flowing conversation and we see where it goes. So I have had the opportunity to speak to so many. I've spoken to musicians, comedians, doctor, lawyer, wrestlers, Reiki masters, and entrepreneurs as young as 13. And these conversations explore the reality that creativity is not cute, it is necessary. People have defined creativity as that magic spark, how we show up in our life, imagination, basically all that we are and want to be, do, or have. So I believe from my heart that sharing these stories gives one the ability to expand their thinking, open themselves up for more self-expression, to feel more empowered, connected, and dare I say, happy. So my inspiring guest for today is Emma Května. She is a Canadian writer and poet with UK and Czech roots, currently living in Nova Scotia, on the traditional territory of the, now I'm going to kill this and I'm sorry, you're going to have to say it, Nation, I'm sorry. Her creative writing has appeared.
Hello.
So, Emma, I wasn't finished reading your bio.
That's okay. I thought I'd jump in. It's Mi'kmaq.
Mi'kmaq, thank you.
No worries. Carry on.
Thank you. Her creative writing has appeared in Filling Station, Planisphere Quarterly, Bell Press, and FAYD Digital. In 2019, her fiction was shortlisted in a UK writing contest. Emma is also an alternative writing teacher, musician, artist, magical thinker, and host of the podcast Wild Creative. Whew, Emma, welcome to the space.
Thank you so much, Hollis. I'm so excited for this.
I'm so happy to talk to you about this being this. Oh my God, you are so multifaceted. So before we dive in and really get into the nitty gritty, are there any fun facts or is there anything that you would like to share before we get started?
You know, I was thinking about this before our talk today, and I kept coming up blank with fun facts because I thought, I don't know, what's a fun fact about myself? All I could come up with was like, oh, I don't like coffee. It gives me headaches. But that's boring. But so then I thought of something else, which is more of a story than a fun fact, but kind of a fun fact is I once used the magic of creative writing, specifically a short story, to process and let go of, subconsciously let go of a past best friend relationship that I kept having dreams about my ex-best friend. And in the dreams, I would, every time I saw her in the dreams, she would say, oh, are we friends? Are we friends? And I would say, no, we're not friends. Because we had a bad friendship end back in high school. Mm-hmm. And then this was in university that this was happening. And I just, for some reason, it was on my third year and I was just couldn't stop dreaming about her for some reason. I don't know if I was feeling nostalgic about high school at that time or what. So I wrote a short story about two girls who had a falling out years ago and they suddenly meet again and they kind of get to hash everything out. And at the end of the story, they kind of go their separate ways, but on good terms. And then that night or the next night, I had another dream about her. And in the dream, she said, are we friends? Are we good? And I said, yeah. And then that was it. I never saw her again in the dreams. So it was the coolest thing that's ever happened to me with writing and creativity far. That's one of the coolest things. So I thought that was a fun fact.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it goes back to this concept that we rewrite. Mm-hmm. So you rewrote the story.
Yep.
And you replaced it. And it was like this energetic being in itself that wanted to be resolved. And you did that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's really interesting how our subconscious is always trying to tell us something in one way or the other. Sometimes it's really obvious and repetitive, like in a dream. Sometimes it's very subtle and it kind of is waiting for the right moment to show you something, but it's always there. Yeah.
About that, waiting for the right moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
So, anybody who's joining us live, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. Any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box below and you can be part of the conversation. So what's really funny, Emma, is that's so the would you rather question that I picked for you is you can't make this stuff up. So here we go. I'm going to ask you,
Oh, great.
would you rather stop time or go back in time?
Oh. I think I want to just say I think I'm leaning towards instinctively go back in time, because I don't know what the purpose of stopping time would be for me. I don't know what I would do with that, or how it would help anyone else, but going back in time, it could change a few things. Maybe that would screw with things, but or I could just go look at cool other time periods and then come back here. Yeah, really go back in time.
I love that. And immediately it's great. Well, first, because I was like, you can't make this up, because here you were, in a sense, you kind of went back in a time you were in this time, but you fixed something that was back in time.
I retrospectively resolved something.
Yeah. But what's so great is innately what you said, in that I don't know how that would serve to stop time, because it just goes to show you, like, and I don't know how it would help anybody else, which it just kind of shows innately who we are. If it's
exactly,
because we're here to lift up and do our work and affect other people.
Life's a collaboration, not just with our friends and family, but I think everyone at large, humanity. So yeah, it's a good would you rather.
It's so funny because it's always an intuitive hit, and it's kind of like a strong stop when I scan all of them, and that was a strong stop. So
yeah,
there we go. So very good, very good. So okay, so let's dive into the nitty gritty, and starting with our first question, which is, how do you define creativity?
Ooh, okay. So creativity to me is simply taking action on inspiration. And that can be any type of inspiration. It doesn't have to be artistic, it can be anything. And I think creativity in doing that, maybe perhaps finding new ways to do something, or uniquely putting together something that somebody else has done, or various ways of doing something, and meshing them together or putting a new spin on it. I think it's a bit of innovation in that regard, but then it's also this taking action on inspiration. You get that inspiration, I'm going to act on it, and now that's being creative. Yeah,
that's so important, right? Instead of, well, I have to say, actually, there is a time for me, I can say, where it's kind of, I have to sit with it for a minute, but it's not sitting, it's not sitting to avoid. I've done that plenty of times. So there has been the avoidance where I'm like, I'm just going to sit on this for a while and da 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 da.
Yeah.
But when it's let this kind of feel into it a little bit and see what it wants to be, and then the action, not waiting a year.
Yeah, let it brew, because you don't want to necessarily impulsively react to something, react to inspiration. It's acting on the inspiration. It's which doesn't mean you have to do it in right then and there. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe you haven't thought about it long enough, or brewed or ruminated in it long enough. But yeah, I think you hit on something too. There's a difference between taking pause to reflect and go within and meditate on something, and then there's taking pause because you're procrastinating or avoiding or putting it off, or you're scared to do it, like it's a fear-based decision.
Yes.
So yeah,
that was a very good wordage and distinction. And I like how you just said reactive inspiration.
Yeah.
Basically. That's really good. I'm gonna kind of use that.
Yeah, you can have it. Yeah.
Thank you. We can share it or
Sure.
anybody can use it, but it's that yeah, it's that idea of just kind of, like, I'm immediate now I have to say some things, like, I had this idea all of a sudden one time where it was very reactive. It just literally dropped into my head where, it was a smashing mosaics. It
Mhm.
was just in my head, it was just like smashing mosaics.
Hmm.
I'm gonna have up to 10 people in a space, probably my house. I'm not sure where the space is going to be.
Yeah.
And they're going to break things and we're going to put it together to make something new. And I posted it. I literally within an hour posted it on social media and I had 8 people signed up.
Wow, that's so cool.
And that was just very, because it just felt, I was like, okay, I have to take action like now.
And I think when you have those moments, you kind of know, like you kind of know that it feels right to do that.
Yes.
I feel like with that instance, you probably weren't. You're probably pretty confident in doing that, and weren't second guessing yourself. You weren't doubting. There wasn't like uncertainty. So I feel like in those moments when you have that feeling, it can feel right to just act in the moment, and there's nothing wrong with that either. The great thing about creativity is like there's no wrong or right way to do it, really.
Yeah.
You just kind of do it, whatever in whatever way that works for you and however that looks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds like
Wow.
a fun project though. Mosaics made collaboratively by different people.
It was fun. Yeah. Each person
Yeah.
created their own, but it's immediately and why people honestly responded is they're like, oh my god, I get to smash things. It's like these smash rooms, It's
Yeah.
like permission to break something because that's usually you're not allowed to do that.
Right. Yeah.
So here you're being invited to break things and then take it and make something new from it, and it's very freeing.
I like that. And this reminds me of a guest I had on my podcast where she was looking at old works of art and old
Mhm.
things of art that she had done, printmaking, and she was seeing, whoa, what can I do with that now? And she like would add another layer to it and like texturize it, and it was like really cool. So it was interesting. She kind of like recycled, or
Oh.
like her old art came back around again, and she did something different to it,
Mhm.
which was, I think that's really cool. So that's a kind of, that's another way of being creative, is you don't have to
Yes.
necessarily think of something, fresh out of the box, brand new, never been done before.
Yes.
It can be something old that you made years ago, and you take it out again and you look at it, whether it's an old story, an old piece of art, and like, or I don't know, a piece of old fabric, and then you sew it into something new, or you rewrite that story, or whatever it may be. So it's,
Yes.
I like the recycling nature of creativity. It doesn't have to be flashy and new every single time.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, I totally agreed, and
Yeah.
it's this idea that it's new to you
Right.
as the creator, and taking, whether it's an old concept or an idea. I've found an old sketchbook, and I was like, "Wow, I really," just to kind of show the progression of a concept. I was like, "I've always been interested in signs." When I traveled to Europe, I was always taking pictures of their signs. I was just always
Hmm.
thinking about it's so cool how they look different representations in different
Yeah.
countries. Um, so here being like 20 some years later, I was like, ooh, then these ideas just started flowing. Before I didn't so much do it,
Hmm.
anything with the concept. I just had photographs. But then about a year ago, I just created a series based off of one-way signs.
Oh, cool. That's really cool. Yeah.
So it's just like this concept, like you said, of this recycled concept and almost seeing like a thread of interest
Hmm.
forever,
Yes.
but
Well,
then
it's,
doing something about it.
well, then it's kind of like, how people say, "Oh, I've read this book 7, 8 times, and every time I read it, I find something new."
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same thing with art, and we're always, because we're always evolving as people. So you're not the same instance of yourself back then when you made it as you are now. You're gonna see something different. You're gonna think
Yes.
about it differently. So in that way, art is always new and innovative, I think.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
even when you turn it around to being like an entrepreneur or
Hmm.
whatever your expertise is in your job, you're constantly evolving.
Hmm. Yes.
So what you did when you were in your 20s isn't going to look like what you're doing when you're in your 40s, whether it's the same job or a different job, because you've changed.
You're a different person. And even like on a cellular level, you're different.
Hmm.
We're always shedding our skin, quite literally. I know it's gross, but we do. But like we're not the same person at any moment in time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful concept. Can be scary to some, but there's freedom in that.
Yeah, I think so. And people always are, I think one of the biggest concerns of humanity is that we're running out of time and we don't have enough time, and death is imminent, and what am I going to do with my life? But it's, when you think of it in that way, it's like, well, you're already doing so much with your life just by existing, because you're changing every moment,
Right,
whether you're
right.
doing anything or not. You're always different. So in
Yeah.
the background, this is always running, right? So
Yes.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. So let's learn about more about you, Miss Emma. So in what
Sure.
I call this variety of being a writer, musician, artist, magical thinker, wherever you want to start, kind of take us on a little journey about where you've been and how you've gotten to where you are at this moment.
Okay.
A little broad, I know. So
Yeah.
wherever you want to start.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start when I was a kid, and I won't take forever to get to where I am now. But
Uh-huh.
when I was a kid, I did write a lot. That was like my main kind of thing. I remember writing this like Agatha Christie murder mystery story in grade 3. It's about it, but I
Wow.
like took it with me on our trip to Mexico and wrote it while I was there, because I was like, it's due when I get back and I have to write it. So I had like 20, 30 pages written by hand, which when typed up was like 3 pages, because I was like, you know, grade, 8-year-old writing. So,
Right.
but I've always written or been into writing ever since then. I've kept a journal since I was a kid, and I'm, 29 now, so I have like 40 journals. Um,
Hmm.
I love collecting journals. I do actually use them. I do actually write in them. And but then I've also appreciated art, and being creative whenever I can. And but growing up, and growing up in my teens, I did kind of feel drawn to mysticism and like magical thinking and witchiness, but I didn't embrace it at all. Well, I tried to, but I had no idea what the hell I was doing.
Hmm.
And then I just kind of forgot about it and let it go for like a good 10 plus years,
Hmm.
including the writing. Like, I kind of didn't write a lot in my mid to late teens and early 20s. And then when I finally got back into writing in when I was like 20, 21 ish, it was okay for a little while, but then I went through this like 4 year long writer's block. I know some people say, oh, writer's block doesn't exist and this and that, but for me it did. Like, I really couldn't get into writing. I was having such a hard time, and there was reasons for that, personal reasons, like stuff going on in my life that was really
Hmm.
affecting my creativity. So it's
Hmm.
interesting how our life can really affect our creative output, and vice versa. So
Hmm.
so anyway, I went through this period of time where I was too depressed to like write, and then but I really wanted to, because I was like, I have to tell my story. And then when I sat down to write it, I thought, oh, this sucks. Who's gonna read it? Who cares? Like, it's not gonna. So I just had this like paralysis every time I went to write, and it
Hmm.
was really difficult to create anything in my mid 20s. And and then in 2020, which was a magical year for me, I know it was really bad for a lot of other people, but
Hmm.
I was one of the lucky ones. It started off not great. I had just had a terrible breakup. I had lost my dog of 16 years, like just before then.
Hmm.
So I was alone. I was depressed. I was grieving. And then on that top of that, couldn't travel anywhere. So I was like stuck on Vancouver Island. The ferries had stopped. I literally couldn't leave the island. So I was getting like stir crazy. And I went on this like magical solo road trip in my car by myself for
Hmm.
2 weeks, just living in the car, driving around the island, parking off the side of the road, on logging roads, camping, eating outdoors. And it was like the best thing I could ever have done at that point. And that really reignited a lot of creativity for me, including the
Hmm.
magical thinking and the witchiness, all of that back. And I was like, oh
Mm.
yeah, I was into this stuff when I was like 16. why am I so drawn to this? And then that just, the rest is history, and here I am. So I fully embrace that side, and I understand more about my writing process now than I ever have before. And I know I'm not done. Like, there's always more to learn. And now I'm teaching creative writing, which I did not think I'd be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, I've always played piano and sung since I was a kid. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but I never wrote my own songs. I only ever did covers. But now, in the past year, I've actually started writing my own songs and singing, and I actually like it. They're not cringy, actually. Because anytime I tried to do it when I was younger, I was like, "This is horrible. I'm not. No, I can't write lyrics." But
Mm-hmm.
now I actually can. So things like switched or changed, and I just feel more creative now than I ever have before. Essentially, yeah.
So was that, thank you for sharing all of that.
You're welcome. It's a lot.
And it wasn't a long journey in all of it, but it was very,
Mm-hmm.
you jam-packed it with a lot of really great information and really painting a picture of you along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate that. So when in 2020, when you went and did the driving trip,
Mm-hmm.
um, is that when everything started to change?
Yes. Um, yes, especially the second trip. The first trip was just like a really good for my mental health. Like, I desperately needed that.
Yeah.
It was like in a pit of despair, as were many people at that time. And I, yeah, that was when I was on that trip. I really focused on my writing, and like a big question I had at that time for that trip was, why can't I write poetry? Because I have primarily been a prose writer my whole life, and I had never written poetry growing up. Didn't read it, didn't understand it. It's mysterious to me. Don't know how poets do it. I just didn't get it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd never really like looked at that before, and tried to figure out like why is it so easy for me to write a short story or an essay, but like I'm paralyzed when I try to write a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And I made all these connections about like my body and the fact I was disembodied. And to me, I realized for me personally that poetry is a very bodily or embodied
Mm.
and yet subconscious practice. And I was really out of touch with my subconscious and my intuition and my body. So I thought, is this a coincidence? I don't think so. So I started exploring how to become more embodied, and how, and then at the same time listening to my body more. And then that's how I actually wrote my first poem. Was I was just sitting on my deck where I was living at the time. I had like a little outdoor porch thing, and I just
Mm-hmm.
sat there and tried not to think and just listened and sensed the world around me with my body and what was I hearing, feeling, seeing. And I wrote this poem, and I wrote it, and I thought, oh God, I actually like this. Like, I actually wrote a poem for once that I don't hate. and
Mm-hmm.
and it actually also like revealed something to me about myself that I had never
Mm-hmm.
been able to put into words to people, um,
Mm.
about myself. So it was a really interesting, cool experience. And then from there, I just like, now I've gotten poetry published in lit mags, which I never thought would happen. So from someone who never wrote poetry, didn't understand it, to like 2 years later, I now have 2 or 3 poems published. For me, that's crazy. Like, I never thought that would happen. Um, so that was the
Yeah.
first trip. That was just the first trip. Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, I have to give us an audio effect for you here. So
Sure.
I'm gonna do like a little cheering here.
I love that.
So,
Woo!
yay! Yay,
That's
Emma!
amazing. Thank you so
So
much. Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you.
thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
So there wasn't just one trip, there was 2 trips. So these were both in 2020?
Yes, the first trip was in July,
Mhm.
and that was a, an awesome little trip that I did just on the island. And then when things opened up again later in the year, and we were able to go to the mainland,
Mhm.
BC. In
Mhm.
October, I went on another trip, and I went to the Okanagan Valley, which I'd never been to before. Again, just
Mhm.
alone in my car, um, for 2 weeks, and that was an awesome trip too. And that was when I got back into the like magical thinking side of myself,
Mhm.
which was it happened purely by chance. I picked up this magazine in a grocery store. The magazine aisle in the grocery store that nobody ever
Yes.
goes down.
Yes.
I went down it on that trip on the first or second day I was driving towards the Okanagan Valley, and I was like, I'm just gonna go down here and look and see what books and things they have. And there was a magazine there on witches, and I mean, of course, picked it up because I've always been into that. And I was reading it in the car that night, and I thought, oh my god, this is like one of the missing pieces for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so from there I just got right back into that way of thinking. And then that was that, and then connecting that with writing as well was just like it reinforced everything for me. So yeah, that was a really special trip.
So first I have to say, and I don't know if it's the right word that it feels to me right now, is to say that's brave. It's a
Oh,
brave
thank
thing
you.
to do from my perspective of you were like, I'm taking a trip by myself and for however long the period of time is, and talk about reconnection. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
connection in every sense of the word. Connection to self, connection to time and space, connection to
Yep.
environment, this connection, and
Yeah.
then following your intuition of having like this. A friend of mine, her name is Michelle Thornton, who it's a really great channel on YouTube, and this is one of the things she was talking about was intuitive dates. Take yourself on an intuitive date.
I love that.
Literally get in your car if that's what you need to do, or a walk, have no plan,
Mm-hmm.
and just see where you end up.
Yep, that's exactly what I did, pretty much. Yeah.
And that's what you did. And that
Yeah.
is, and your world changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know where the hell I'd be actually today if I hadn't done those trips. Those two trips really were catalysts in a lot of ways. And it was so right for me. I'm a Sagittarius. I'm a traveler. That's like in my nature to want to travel. In fact,
Hmm.
I wanted to do more traveling in 2020 because I just had started my online business at the end of 2019, and I thought the reason I started it was so that I could work remotely and travel. And then when I
Hmm.
learned I couldn't travel, I was gutted. So I was like, that's why I actually went on the trips. Partly was because I was like, I need to not be here. I need to go travel. I need to do something. I've been here too long. So plus a bunch of other things, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, the traveling piece for me, that is how I reconnect in a lot of ways. Is I need to be moving and seeing new things and doing new things in new places, often alone, preferably. Just it's just better for me,
Hmm.
rather than being, to me, stagnant and kind of stuck in one place too long. I will
Yeah.
eventually, there will be a breaking point. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's knowing yourself and knowing that you need and creating the
Mm-hmm.
space for that to happen in real ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to go back to this. I really, really appreciate what you said about, because I think people can kind of fill in the blank with whatever it is. Why can't I do this? Why is
Mm-hmm.
this so hard for me? Why is this? And we tend to beat ourselves up depending on whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
But when in your world, you're wondering, why can't I do poetry? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And then breaking it down. And for you, I just realizing of what it means about being embodied and like actually going into your body, which is I guess again to me, connection,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and being in yourself and on the subconscious and all that. I just think that it's a really great talking point and something that people can relate to and whatever that is in their world of when
Mm-hmm.
they really tap in and to figure out the why.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a pretty firm believer in, because it's been my experience, that everything happens for a reason. Like there's usually something, some
Yeah.
reason, I think, whether cosmically or literally a reason for some why things happen. And so I hadn't, and even though I'm a believer of that, I just hadn't applied that to the poetry thing yet. And so when I did, it became like, okay, now I have to answer this now that I've thought of
Yeah.
it. And so there's no stopping me. So questions are for that type of thing. And as you said, it can
Yes.
be applied for anything in life. Just ask a question about a problem
Yes.
you're having or a pattern that you have. And usually it's something like, why am I doing this? Why can't I do that? and then go towards it, and be open about it too. Like, don't go
Yes.
into it with a contrived, already preconceived idea of what you think might be the answer, because I didn't know that was the answer. I didn't know.
Yes.
I would never have connected that to the body thing if I had already if I had just thought, oh, it's because I suck at poetry, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a preconceived thought that I had about myself, and it wasn't true. So
But then it's doing the work
mm-hmm.
and getting to know yourself and realizing strengths, weaknesses, going through the process in order to connect these dots.
Yes, yes, and that is one of the ways you can be creative, because to be creative doesn't mean all the time that you necessarily that you are artistic or have to be artistic. I think there's
Yes.
lots of ways to be creative, and I think one of the ways that I've best utilized creativity was in getting to know myself in a creative way by asking those types of questions, and yeah, getting to know myself better, why it is that I do things, why can't I, quote, can't do things, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, why don't I have this in my life. All of that is self-knowledge, and seeking out that self-knowledge is a way of being creative.
Hmm.
Yeah, to me at least. Yeah.
Seeking it out and not
Mm-hmm.
hiding, not being
Yes.
like, oh, that's kind of dark. I'm
Right.
going to avoid that bullshit if I can.
No, and that's the thing about that kind of stuff is, if you avoid it or try to go around it or turn your back to it, it doesn't go away. You have to go
Yeah.
through it and leave it behind you.
Yes.
That's that's the case with a lot of things in life, honestly. When you're processing something,
Yeah.
or avoiding processing something, it's never going to go away or get
No.
better.
No.
It's always going to be there. You have to go through it. So,
Which to me goes back to the story that you shared in the beginning with your best friend in school.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah,
Even if you can't deal, even if it's not directly one-on-one with that person, it's creating and making peace with it in a scenario so there can be freedom.
yeah, yeah, and it probably meant more to me than it would to her. Like, I don't know what she's doing, was doing at that point in her life. I still don't really know what she's doing in her life, to be honest. But um, it in my world, that important thing for me to move through. Apparently, my subconscious wanted to process it, and in the conscious world where my body lives and my waking mind lives, I was
Yeah.
able to do that with a short story. So,
Yeah.
because I think our conscious and subconscious do talk to each other all the time. And sometimes we listen, sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's hard
Yeah.
to, if your mind's full with all the things of today and social media. So that's why it's so important, I think, to quiet your waking mind, um, if you're feeling like disconnected to yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So before we move on to the second question, I do want to address what I did read in your bio just for further
Mm-hmm.
explanation for myself. So in 2019, your fiction was shortlisted in a UK writing contest. So what does that mean exactly?
Right. So when I was 20, I think, 21, or no, maybe 22 or 23, I submitted a short story to a little contest that was based out of the UK, and it was open to international writers. And so a shortlist means that I was one of my story, along with, I don't know, several others,
Hmm.
were picked out of all the submissions. And first I was longlisted, so they had a long list of about 20 people that they had narrowed down the submissions to, and then
Hmm.
from that they narrowed it down further to a short list of about 10. So I made the short list, and then from
Hmm.
the short list they chose like the top three, the winners: first, second place, third place.
Okay.
So that's what
Okay.
that means. Yeah.
Okay. So that was a big accomplishment.
Yeah, it was for me at the time, and well, it still is. And it's shortlist awards. It's not really a award, I guess, but it's a credit, I guess you can kind of brag about on
Hmm.
your website or whatever you want. And like you said, for it was important, like for me at the time, for sure. I was um, that one of the first places I had ever sent that story to, so I was really happy that it made it to the short list, even if it didn't win. I still consider that a win personally,
Right.
because it's so
Right.
competitive, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And it's so
Hmm.
important. Sounds cheesy. It's so important to realize, but it really is. And I'm saying it to myself out loud, I guess I think
Yeah.
too, because all of these things that we do on a regular basis and these accomplishments that we do have, and we kind of are like, well, a person could look at that and say, well, I didn't get picked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then you look at it and say, I was on the short list. You know how
Yeah,
freaking competitive that is?
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, making it to the short list or long list even is, or even an honorable mention is nothing to, you know, turn your back at or be
Hmm.
unhappy with, because that means that that piece was promising, at least in that contest. And it's, well, it is, it, to me, it means that that thing that you submitted, it has potential. It has really good potential because it made it that far. So you could
Hmm.
submit it somewhere else and maybe get further.
Hmm.
So to me, it's like an encouragement when you get that type of feedback.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you can, I mean, really, you can choose to see the world how you choose. And if you choose to see that as a lose, well, I'm a loser, I'm rejected, I didn't make it to the top, well, then that's what it's going to be for you. But if you
Yeah.
choose to see it as, oh, sweet, I made it to the short list. I didn't even think I'd make it to the long list. Geez, like this is an international competition, right?
Right.
So like that's pretty freaking cool.
Pretty
um,
freaking cool.
yeah, yeah. It's all about
Yeah.
perspective, right? So.
Always is. Totally
Mm-hmm.
agree. So, okay. So you mentioned some of the things like writing and travel. How else, just to learn a little bit more about you, how else do you incorporate more creativity into your own life?
Hmm. Um, I would say making time and space to do it is a really good one.
Hmm.
Without I don't know what the word is, but without, not without shame, but without feeling bad about it. Like if you need that time and space to be creative, work
Without
on your,
guilt?
without guilt, and like um un there's a word that is on the tip of my tongue.
It'll
I don't know
come to
what it
you.
is. I'll think of
Yeah.
it. But like if you need that time to work on your business, your website, or your offer that you're making, or your painting, or your story, or your macrame, like whatever it is that you want to create, that you're inspired to do,
Hmm.
I, I think unashamedly, un,
Mm.
undoubtedly, like unguiltily, these aren't real words, but
They're
just,
good words.
but yeah, but you get the point. Like just do it, and don't feel bad about it. Like don't feel bad if you have to tell your family or your kids to please go away. I really need to
Hmm.
do this, but like this is my time now. Like don't, yeah, like reclaim that time
Yes.
that and that you need in that space, um, and just don't feel bad about it. Like and lean into it, and so. What was the question? How do I more creative in my
how,
life?
how do you incorporate more creativity into
Okay,
your own life?
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so for me, I need to have that time and space to do it, like dedication, I guess, dedicated time and space,
Hmm.
because I can't. I'm personally not someone who can just kind of wishy washy swim in and out of it easily. Like I have to
Hmm.
be like in the zone. I need to like if I'm sitting down to work on like my book or something, I'm gonna be there for like 3 4 hours.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people don't have that luxury because they have kids and stuff, and other things and jobs and things. But um, personally, for me, like that's just what works, and I
Hmm.
luckily can do it that and can do that way.
Hmm.
Um, so I like to and also getting inspired, like getting into the mood, getting into the zone, as I mentioned. For
Yeah.
me, like it's a transition. It's not a switch I can turn on and off. Again,
Yeah.
this is different for different people, but for me, I there's usually some sort of transition that happens. You usually it comes from reading. If I'm reading a book, or I'm reading some poetry, or reading somebody else's piece of creative writing, that often makes me want to write, because I'm reading, especially like it has to be good writing, first of all, to be inspired by it. So if it's like good writing and it's something I like and I like reading it, and it's like, oh, I want to do that, I want to write a story about that, or this makes me want to work on my character or whatever, that makes me want to go be creative. So
Yeah.
yeah, so like there's a transition piece there for it too. But that's, and this is all in relation to art, like writing. But as I mentioned earlier, I think there's other ways you can be creative outside of
Yes.
being
Please tell me
artistic.
more. Tell me
So,
all those areas. Yeah.
well, this is where my magical thinking comes in. Like as I mentioned earlier, like learning about yourself, like self-knowledge is, I think, a really key part of creative expression. In fact, I think that was like that I talked about my first episode on my podcast. And one of the ways I kind of tried to get more self-knowledge about myself was through things like astrology and my natal chart and my Enneagram test, which I actually haven't done yet. I need to do that. But the, what's it called? The Myers-Briggs test, like looking into those types of tests and quizzes, whether you're into them or not, you don't, do whatever you want. But I just think it's a really interesting way to look at yourself through through those types of patterns that other people have noticed about the way people are, like astrology, for instance, and the zodiac. And I'm not someone who easily just believes in things. I'm actually quite scientific and logical, rational minded. But but I will believe in my experiences because I've experienced it. So I've had experiences that, they've facilitated those beliefs to grow. So because it's been my experience, I feel I can believe in it and it works for me. And those are the things and the tools that I turn to. So that would be, I guess, my advice or my tip would, if even if you doubt it or you're skeptical about it, being open-minded about learning about yourself is like the first step. And and then once you're open-minded about that, you just go towards the things that you are drawn to. Like for me, I was drawn to my natal chart and astrology, but maybe other people aren't going to be drawn to that. They'll be drawn to something else, like, I don't know, going on a hike in the woods and seeing what comes up when they're walking by themselves in nature. If that's something they don't regularly do, like do something that you maybe don't always do all the time, or something that's new to you, because you just don't know how you're going to react. Like if you're in your comfort zone too much, I guess is what I'm talking about really, is comfort zones. Get out of it. But like in small steps, small bite-sized manageable steps. Like don't go do something you're absolutely terrified to do if you scar yourself. But like pick something easy that's totally doable that you're skeptical about or unsure of or whatever, and go do it. And to me, that's being creative. Like that's a really easy way to be creative in your life. If you're not naturally artistic or don't want to be artistic, or you don't want to work on your art today or whatever, then there's so many other ways to be creative. So
because it's about expression. It's like the creativity of life. It's funny, you just made me think of, so I've always enjoyed nature. I love the beach. Like that's my space.
Nice.
But walking in nature, I enjoy it, but I get fixated on the idea of snakes, which is a complete party killer. So as I'm walking with my family, which we've done just a few times, I'm constantly looking at the ground. And I'm just like looking, and I'm like tense. And my kids that aren't, they're 19 and 22, they're like, oh my God, would you relax? I'm like, and then I hear a noise. I'm like, They're like, oh my God, you're so stressful. I said, I'm so sorry that I came, because I'm kind of ruining this for everybody. But at the same time, it's a good lesson that it kind of just forced me to, they're like, you got to get over this. And in my head, I'm thinking it's ridiculous. But at the same time, if I beat myself up and keep saying this is ridiculous, that does nothing but make me feel bad. So, what are the baby steps, like you were saying, to make myself feel more successful at it? Well, to go to a place where I know the place that's outside and I
Mm-hmm.
feel more comfortable walking around. That works for me right now.
Right. Yes, exactly. It's a good example for sure. Yeah, like you can step out of your comfort zone and still be in a familiar place.
Hmm.
Like you said, you went to somewhere that was familiar for you, but it was still outdoors, which is something maybe you don't do all the time, or it's not the beach or whatever. Um, but it was still you felt safe enough to go there. So yeah, there's lots of ways to take those like baby steps
Yeah.
outside your comfort zone. And before you know it, it'll have grown so much that you'll look back and you'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe I was over there before in that little
Yes.
circle. Like this year for me has been so expansive.
Has it?
Yeah, like I'm not the
Hmm.
same person I was like even a few months ago, 5 months ago. It's, yeah.
Hmm.
So
Mm.
and that's, I think, the best journey of life is the evolution of yourself. So,
Yes. And you
yeah.
gave some really nice concrete steps when you talked about self knowledge
Hmm.
and about, because it can seem kind of abstract, but you
Yeah.
said astrology, your natal chart, your ideogram, the Myers Briggs. It's like these things of really learning about you. And
Hmm.
then that's just a little glimpse. And I just appreciated the fact that you gave some nice concrete examples. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. No problem. I hope people
Yeah.
try some of them out because
Yeah.
they can be really enlightening too. Or also go see a tarot reader and get a reading done. That can be life changing.
Mhm.
I go to my tarot reader whenever I'm feeling in crisis, which happens every 6 to 12 months, pretty much on schedule. So,
Mhm.
um, and that's all. I always come away from a reading with her feeling like having so much clarity and insight to my problems and what's currently going on for me at that time. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. So before we move on to the last question, I'm wondering, do you have any kind of a morning routine?
No, take the dog out for a walk.
Mhm.
That's it, pretty much. I'm not good with routines. I've
Mhm.
tried to be ritualistic, routine driven type of person every time, or schedule out my creative time or projects, and it never ever ever works ever. And then it
Mhm.
makes me feel bad that I didn't stick to it, so then I hate myself and I think that I'm terrible and that I'm not productive because I can't stick to a routine. So I've just given up on that. um,
Mhm.
yeah, because my days are different all the time. um, just because I work from home online, and sometimes I'll go out at different times in the week,
Yeah.
and as social things come up or whatever. And so then for me, having a routine doesn't make sense because I'm going to be doing something else anyway by the time
Yeah.
I get to this thing that I scheduled. So yeah, so the only routine I can say I have in the morning is I get up like maybe around 8 a.m. Because my dog launches himself onto the bed. So that's, I have an alarm, but he always comes up just before the alarm. So
Yes.
um, yeah, so I love that. And then I get up, go to the bathroom, take him out for a nice little walk, come back and probably check my emails and social media and like just see what's new. Who wants what from me today? um,
Which is
yeah.
beautiful. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just have to
Hmm.
say, I think it's important to, when I ask people about their morning routine, it doesn't have to be this big, expansive thing. The
Hmm.
fact that you get up, you walk the dog, you go out into nature, you do all of that, like that's kind of a ritual,
Hmm. Yeah.
and and giving ourselves, it doesn't have to be this I sit for 2 hours and meditate and journal,
Hmm.
and things can happen throughout the day that are kind of, it's just being open.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess I, in that sense, I guess I do kind of have a routine without even really thinking about it. Like it's just something I naturally fell into, a pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then once I'm done checking work stuff, maybe I might work for like an hour or two if I have something to do. I usually make tea at that time as well, and I have
Mhm.
tea like 2 or 3 times a day, so that's
Mhm.
that's like one of the first things. And then like around 11 a.m. ish, I'll make breakfast. So I used to eat breakfast all the time, like right away when I got up, but in the past year or so, I've started leaving it till a bit later.
Yes.
Um,
Me too.
so and
Yeah.
it just works better. And then I kind of treat that as my break. Like I'll take like an hour to make and eat breakfast because I'm like listening to something while I'm doing it. So I'm not quick about it.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's like a break, and then I go back to doing whatever else I was doing. So yeah,
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I have to go back to your dog jumping on the bed. That is
yes.
very late. Is it he or she?
He,
He is very kind in letting you
I
sleep till 8
know.
o'clock.
He's such a good boy. I love him. But
He really is.
we go to bed around midnight or soon thereafter. So that's an 8 hour sleep. But I guess for a
Okay.
dog, he could get up at any point and 6 or 7 a.m. But he chooses. Yeah, maybe I have him well trained or something without realizing. I don't know.
he
But
just he
he
just
just
shook on
knows.
it. He
Yeah,
just
he agrees.
he's like, yes. Because
Yeah.
one of our cats, we have 3 cats, and like clockwork, it is between 3 and 3:30 in the morning.
Hmm.
They're up
Oh
on the bed.
wow.
One is always they're generally sleeping with us anyway, but if they're not, jumps on the bed, and if he doesn't get through, then their cat jumps up and they tag team,
Oh
and
no.
they do their thing. And then one of the cats literally scratches at my husband on the blanket, literally like takes the blankets off. So it's,
Wow.
yeah, they have us
That's a
trained. We're wrapped around their little paw.
that's a whole orchestra there of yeah,
It's very
3 a.m.
orchestrated.
Yeah. Wow. No, my little guy is I think he also can sense when I'm starting to wake up because he can hear me moving, and
Yes.
I somehow guess my body knows it's almost 8 a.m. and then that's when he comes up. So
Yes,
yeah.
yeah, they are very in tune, and if you have to get
Yes.
up to go to the bathroom, you're kinda screwed. That's when I'm like,
Yeah, pretty much.
"Darn,
Yep. Yep.
why shouldn't have just gotten up." Anyway,
Exactly.
okay, everybody, that was interesting, right?
Yeah.
So so, the 3rd and final question, which kinda wraps it up and puts a nice little bow on it, is
Hmm.
why do you think creativity is important?
Hmm. Well, as I mentioned earlier, like we're always evolving, but I don't think that's always inherent. Like I don't think that's always a given that we're gonna evolve. Like
Mm,
if we're not being creative, like I think being stagnant and subversive and submissive is like the bane of creativity's existence. You
mhm,
know, like if you're static, it's you're not evolving. You know, if you're on autopilot, you're not evolving. And I think the cure for all of that is creativity. Not again, not artisticness, not necessarily being artsy, just being
mhm,
creative about how you're choosing to live your life. You know what you're choosing to do with it, all the choices you make, the input and education or knowledge that you put into that, making that decision. That's all creativity, because you can choose to do anything in your life and with your life, um, and that inherently is creative. So
yes,
I think, and I, as I said, I think being creative is the key to evolving and growing as a person, and getting to where you want to go to in life, and getting to experience the things you want to. You have to be creative. So
yes.
I think that's why it's really important. I think it's important for mental health and self-expression and your humanity, honestly,
No
sharing
big
it.
deal.
Yeah,
No big deal,
just
everybody. It's just humanity.
no pressure, but um, if you're not expressing yourself, you're not contributing to the conversation, or um, you're not if you're not evolving, you're probably not very happy. I'm just going to take a stab in the dark and say you're probably
Yeah,
not the happiest person.
right.
um, and yeah, and having that sense of shared experience with humans and humanity is so
Hmm.
easily done with art and creativity and innovation all the time. And it can feel very lonely to not be part of that. It's like that's another that feeds into mental health, right? So I think
Yes.
it's just everywhere you go, it just feeds everything, and I think it is a great source of life, um, and for our soul too. Like it's a great source for feeding our soul, being creative. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Gosh. And there were so many pearls in there. But my brain keeps going back to the 3 S's you said: stagnant, submissive, and static.
Yes.
That if you have all of this is creativity is not flowing. You're not incorporating it into your life if you're feeling these things. And like you said, going to take a stab at it, probably not feeling very good.
No, exactly. Yeah. And I don't think it takes a genius to figure that out. And I don't think I have to know you personally to figure that out either. Like I think we all understand something about that, which is that if I'm not being myself, if I'm not being creative about who I am, or if I'm not in control of my life and being free and creative in the way I want to, like how else would you feel other than unhappy, right? Or unfulfilled, or lonely, like all those things. So yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Emma, how can people connect with you?
They can so find beautiful. Me. Thank you. They can find me online on Instagram is primarily where I hang out. My handle is at Emma Května, which I don't know if you have links or in the show notes, or if
you can put them. I don't. I should put them in the about, but why don't you after you say, you'll put them in the chat box.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. So on Instagram, and then on my website, which is emmakvetna.com. Currently, at the time of this recording, it is under construction. I'm about to launch it, so it's not live right this second, but probably by the time people hear this down the road, it certainly will be. So that's emmakvetna.com, and I will be offering lots of creative writing classes on there in 2023. I call myself an alternative creative writing teacher because all the stuff I teach is not what you typically would find in a creative writing classroom. So it's going to be really fun, cool, neat, unique stuff. If you're a writer, definitely check it out. And then, my podcast, Wild Creative, you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Samsung Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. I believe you should be able to find it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, you're going to put that in the chat box, but before you do all that, is there anything that's top of mind, or anything where you're like, oh, I forgot to say that before we say our goodbye?
I don't think so. I think this was a really awesome conversation, and I just want to thank you so much for the awesome questions and the good back and forth. And it was just, I felt we touched on a lot of really important things here. So I'm happy that I got to speak at all, and I hope people found something interesting and enlightening for themselves in it.
Thank you. I think I definitely did. Emma, I am so grateful. It really was a very inspiring conversation for me. So, and I'm just very happy to have met you. So thank you for all the light that you put out into the world and all that you're doing. I'm very appreciative. So thank you.
That's so nice to hear. Thank you so much. And thank you for this podcast, the conversations. It's what we need in life.
It's so much. So I'm going to put like a little magic spell while you're putting in the chat box, and then I'm going to say our official goodbye. So here's our magic spell.
I love that.
There we go, everybody. So thank you, Joan. I appreciate you. This space is all about inspiring each other. It's all about connecting and sharing stories. So please follow, share all of this, because we need to uplift each other. I feel like we've always needed this, but I think we need it now more than ever. So do all that good stuff and just get the word out there, because I know that I'm inspired after every conversation. So wherever you are listening in the world, I wish you a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good evening, and look forward to chatting again soon. So goodbye, everybody. Feeling inspired? Let's just get rid of this. Throw away this whole perfectionism thing. This whole concept that we have to know how to do everything. You know what? You don't. Let's just do things and try things and realize what we like and what we don't like. It's all part of the process. The self-awareness feels so good. You feel more connection to yourself, connection to others, and be a happier, more joyful person. Just imagine that. So you are where you are in the process. So you can dip your toe in the water to try new things at a slower pace, or you can dive right in. Here at I Am Creative and Express Yourself Publishing, we meet you where you are. So there are so many ways to check us out. Explore our experiential kits. They have everything in them that you need to try new things. You don't have to buy anything else but this kit, and just explore. There's Creative Shui, which is 7 elements to joy and happiness. Through the publishing house, Express Yourself Publishing, multi-author books, coffee books, solo book opportunities. It is all about expression, all about it. And it's, again, just trying these things and realizing what you're good at. Don't all of a sudden think that you only fit into one box, because we don't. We are not made for boxes. There is also my TV show, I Am Creative. Check it out. The links are all in the body of this podcast. You can just click the link. And you know what? Don't say, oh, maybe I'll check it out tomorrow. Life's too short. Just click it. See what it's about. There is honestly no judgment. It's all about exploring the possibilities, expressing yourself, and expanding your thinking. I will give you the website, which is iamcreativephilly.com. So I am Creative Philly, PHILLY.com. And just remember that you are an expressive being, so own it. I am looking forward to hearing your story, because we all have one.